right. Well, good morning for everybody. We just finished up some introductions I have a guest with me today, Michael Duncan, who is not just a part of our program. He is an alumni. He is a deep-rooted wealth of knowledge, and I'm going to be blessed enough today to bring a little bit of his insights. Not all of it. We need a Joe Rogan style 5-hour podcast to probably even touch the surface of what all he can provide. But he's got a great view and a unique background that I think is going to help us all as job seekers, not just navigate a very difficult topic, but one that I feel is extremely important because of the time of year that it is. As we move and shift into March and April, and then into the summer months, it's very important that we remove the barrier and the feeling that we have of quote unquote stuck. And we'll dive a little deeper there, as the title of this is, if you're one that likes to write down titles, you're not stuck, you're uncomfortable. And the idea here is it's a reframing, of course, it's Mindset Monday, that's what we have to do. But the idea is for you to really understand the difference. And when I was digging in and looking through, I actually came up with a couple different quotes that I saw that I loved. And one of them, of course, I shot over to Michael. And I'll read it to you, and then I'll jump in with some questions. But for Michael, this is what I saw. You're not stuck, you're uncomfortable. Stuck means no options. Uncomfortable means you have options, they just require growth. And I think this is timely because we're heading into March and April, historically, two of the most active hiring months of the year, right? And so if you go back, the quote itself is, you're not stuck, you're uncomfortable. Stuck means no options. Uncomfortable means you have options. They're just required growth. And then the second piece of that I think is so important is the fact that when you think about March and April, you can't just freeze, right? You have to continue to understand that activity is what's going to help you, but structural activity is what matters, right? So where I want you to go is opportunity will increase over this next several months, regardless of what you do. Your opportunities are going to increase. Your exposure is going to increase regardless of what you do, right? But when that exposure increases, so will your discomfort. And I really want you to understand that. You're going to be uncomfortable, and we have to get very comfortable with being uncomfortable over the next several months. And so as I kind of take a pause for myself, I want to bring Michael in and talk a little bit, from a psychological standpoint. You've worked with a lot of high performers. You and I've had these discussions over the last several months in depth about this, and I've stolen plenty of knowledge from you as I've helped some of my executive clients. But really, why do high performers consistently, and I think that's what we really have in this community, we have a ton of high performers, and we see this as a job seeker in general. A ton of high performers can't find roles, and this is probably the main reason. So why do high performers confuse discomfort with being stuck?
So really one of the things that I think that confusion comes from is they're used to being in a state of momentum. And so from a psychological standpoint, I think a lot of the high performers confuse discomfort with being stuck because they're so used to momentum and moving forward. And when you're someone who solves problems, you lead teams, you move things forward, you progress, that becomes your normal baseline. And so those moments that something slows down, or it's uncertain, or maybe you're even uncomfortable, the mind starts telling you a story that something must be wrong. And so discomfort and stagnation, definitely not the same thing, but I think it gets confused a lot of times. Discomfort is often that stretching into new territory. It's a way of growth that feels like it's becoming more competent. And high performance are wired to operate in areas where they already know how to win. So when they step into something new, a new role, a new challenge, it feels like friction, and friction is definitely uncomfortable.
So I love that. And I know that one of the deeper discussions you and I've had with that is really the concept of how your brain operates when it feels like it's in danger mode, right? And so when you have that uncertainty, or one of the conversations I had this morning with one of my executive clients was really telling in this, was really the idea of, it was a lack of confidence, right? And really that is uncertainty. When you're not confident in something, That's where that comes from. So let's talk about that. So why does that oftentimes put us to make us feel fearful in that danger side of the brain? Where does that come from?
Sure. I think the biggest irony to me is that the very people that are most capable of growth and are high leaders often judge ourselves the harshest throughout that growth process. And so, a lot of times we start saying, why am I stuck? When the better question should be, am I uncomfortable because nothing is moving, or because something new is trying to emerge and I'm just standing in the way of it? But from a mental health standpoint, you have a few things that you're looking at. One is going to be avoidance behavior. That plays a big role. When something feels uncertain or it feels heavy, even when we're high performers, we can subconsciously avoid that situation. And so then you also have loss aversion. Loss aversion, psychologically, humans are wired to fear losing something that's more valuable than what we're gaining. And high performers often have a reputation of expertise or status that we've built over years. And when we step into something new, those risks and that identity, the brain interprets that as a risk of danger rather than opportunity. You also have identity protection. We become who we are. We become the expert, the leader, the one that knows all the answers. Mm-hmm. And so when we're moving into something that's unfamiliar, that's very threatening to our very identity and who we have built ourselves to be. And that can trigger that threat response, where the brain doesn't always distinguish between what a physical threat and a psychological one is. Mm. Fight or flight, we're automatically ready to fight, flee, freeze, and it's hard to move forward from that. And then finally, I think a lot of it for me has been over the years comfort bias. And that's where we prefer environments where we know the rules and we understand how to succeed and what it takes. And when those familiar patterns disappear, that discomfort can really feel like a lack of progress rather than a sign that we're growing into something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's we hear that so much, right? Whether it's the finances, whether it's the confusion of whether or not we even manipulate inside of our brains, right? Were we really that great? How do I take all the 15 things that I did in my previous role and sum it up into this new role? How do we take that jack of all trades concept and filter it in? And all of that then becomes confusion and a lack of clarity, right? And then I know from that, it creates delays and causes, of course, individuals to feel like they're not ready, right? So explain that, help break that down. Why does that occur? Maybe what's a way for some of our job seekers to help self-recognize maybe some of those moments? Because it's easy for us to say, well, I want everything to be perfect, right? I want everything to fall in line. I want these things to be ready for me. What is our brain doing there, and why is it doing that?
So the brain is actually just such a marvelous thing in so many ways, but it's also so much that we don't know. But I think of two questions that come up a lot with me, and when I'm talking to maybe my employees or other leaders, two things that really come up is, why does uncertainty feel like danger to the brain? And it's sort of like what you said. The brain's designed first and foremost to keep us safe. Everything that the brain does, it tells the body, keep us safe, keep us growing, keep us naturally in a state of what we are. And uncertainty means the brain can't easily predict what that outcome is going to be. And when that prediction disappears, the brain interprets that as a potential threat. So the brain naturally prefers certainty over growth, just easier. It's what we're used to doing. The brain is used to keeping everything going the same. So even if the current situation isn't ideal, it's still familiar. And so when it's familiar, it's comfortable. Mm. And so the brain just sets back and it's like, okay, everything is good. Let's stay here. That's when new opportunities, career transitions, leadership roles, those can trigger some really insane alarms inside of the brain and teach us that it's danger. And the brain is just simply trying to reduce that uncertainty for us. The second part of that, I think, what happens when someone delays actions because they don't feel ready? This is where psychology gets really interesting for me, coming from my side of things. When we delay that reaction, I think the brain experiences a temporary relief. Because that avoidance temporarily reduces our anxiety. We feel better about ourselves. We feel like everything is okay. And in that moment, it feels better not to act, not to do anything different. But that relief also teaches the brain an unintended lesson. Every time that we delay, that brain starts reinforcing the idea that the situation was actually dangerous and we escaped it. So over time, delayed action reinforces those fear loops. The longer we wait, the bigger and more intimidating the step begins to feel. So more often, clarity follows action, and growth almost always asks us to move before we feel completely prepared. But the key is going to be recognizing that the discomfort we feel isn't necessarily danger. It's often just the brain trying to adjust to a new level of possibility.
Yeah. So when I hear that, and I think, man, we teach this so much inside of the community, right? Where it really we want to, and we're using this word. This is my new word that I keep saying over and over: signal. And I love this word. This because it just makes sense, right? When you, any way you look at the word signal, it should be an identifier, right? It should be an identifier that there is something either coming in or you're giving something out, right? And so this signal is being transmitted. And I think it just truly layers this down. So what would be the signal that I'm going to think through here as I look through behaviors of the job seeker, and I hear this all the time, which is, either you could use the word discomfort, I'm uncomfortable, I don't have certainty in this, so I'll do this later. And it's that constant push to get that job seeker to realize that if you just do the next thing, the simplest, smallest win, the tiniest piece, it'll move you forward. So even if it's the concept of I'll apply when my resume is perfect, or my favorite one, I'll network when I'm more confident in my elevator pitch or who I want to network with. And that's an easy one that I see people just want to pull back from. I've never networked before. It's not comfortable to network. Well, of course it's not, right? It's never easy to do that. Or my other favorite one that I think is, I'll be ready to interview once I'm really prepared. And I think that's the best one, because you can't get away from that interview date. But I've actually heard job seekers cancel and move interviews because even though they had a week, they just couldn't get out of their head that they weren't prepared, even though they're just talking about their story. So anyway, I think the key here is to realize that you're not really stuck when you say those things, and it's okay to say those things. It's just really discomfort, and your brain, you could say lying, you could say disguising, as a little bit of a confusion moment, a lack of clarity. And that's the reason why, and I know I shared this with you before as we were kind of talking through some of the pieces here. A lot of folks have never dived into, or once they do dive into, they see the success of the 9-to-3 rule. I think the action window, the controlled exposure, the daily movement is huge for that. I think that's where reflection, discovery, execution leans in, right? So much. You can use this in the same piece. What am I avoiding? Why does this really truly feel uncomfortable? Discover why that uncomfortability is there. The facts versus emotions conversation, right? Take the emotions, lean into them, know where they come from, lead them back to facts, and then you move away, right? So I know this is where your expertise really comes in. So, how does someone really act, Michael, still feeling uncomfortable? So how does someone really act while they still feel that uncomfortable? What should they do? How do you get over that?
So, I think one of the main things that we should all hear, no matter where we're at in life, no matter where we're at in the process, no matter what task we're trying to accomplish, the one thing that really stands out to me is courage is not the absence of discomfort. And I think a lot of times people confuse that. And, most people assume that people that are confident or high-performing individuals, they always feel ready before they move. But in reality, they often feel the same uncertainty and hesitation that everybody else does. They just learn not to wait for those feelings to disappear. So courage is simply the decision to move forward while the discomfort is still present. And you hit on it earlier. I think one of the best ways to do that is regulated exposure. It's called by a lot of different terms, but in my realm, we call it regulated exposure. And instead of forcing yourself into one massive leap, you just gradually do little things to make your brain retrain through experience that the situation isn't actually as dangerous as you think it is. Whether it's sending that extra resume out, making that network call, doing something that's uncomfortable for you. And that happens through small repeated actions. But every time you make a step, make the call, have that conversation, you're giving your brain new data. And over time, those repeated actions start to retrain what the brain's response is. And so what once felt like threatening begins to be manageable, and what once felt impossible seems to feel normal, because that's what we're training our brain to do. But growth rarely comes from waiting until we feel comfortable, and that's when we're already behind.
Yeah. So in reality, and we've talked about it over and over again as we've gone through this process, and coming out of, say, February, where our big focus was just take the smallest next steps, right, and continue to move forward. So what I'm hearing here is, if you want to have courage, and I love that word, right, structure is desperately needed. If you want to have courage, you want to be intentional in that structure. And most importantly, probably out of all of that, right, you have to progressively put yourself in an uncomfortable position of exposure to new and much greater things. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Awesome.
I think it's important to remember that, there's a couple of different things at play. You have reckless action and courageous action. That reckless action, that ignores all the risk. It moves fast without reflection, without information, without planning, without doing your homework first. And there's going to be consequences to that. It's usually driven by impulse and frustration, and it usually ends in frustration. But then you also have courageous action, which acknowledges that there is a risk there, but it simply refuses to let the fear be the final decision maker. Courage doesn't mean that you're blind to uncertainty. It means that you've thought about the uncertainty, found a path to move forward anyway.
Yeah, and I think, and even before we got started on here, we were talking about, we're talking because Brittany, of course, just landed into a full-time role, right? And she was talking about how they snuck her in for her health benefits and everything, right? And that reminds me of really this piece of, if you don't take action now, you will miss out on those moments. And that's a testament to what Brittany did. She leaned into a space that was uncomfortable. She just said, I'm going to go with this. I'm going to make this happen. And she did, right? And it was not a clean space. And I'm excited I get to talk to her later today, one-on-one, and learn a little bit more about all of her actions she did. Hopefully there's I'm sure there are some great nuggets to share. But it makes me think about the fact, Michael, that, March and April are the high activity hiring months. And all of those decisions and everything's been done. We talked about this all throughout February, how you've got to move. And it's not too late, right? It's really not. And this is actually the time when, if you take action now and you really are deliberate with your actions going forward, a lot of great things can happen for you going into this next week. What advice, and I'm gonna go this way, what advice would you give to anyone who is currently feeling stuck right now? What would you say? What direction would you give them? And what would be the best next step for them?
So for me, it would, again, come back to that reckless action and that courageous, right? And reckless action says, I don't care what happens, no matter what that is. Courageous action says, I know this might be hard, but it matters enough that I'm going to try it anyway. And that's the most meaningful growth: careers, leadership, relationships, personal developments, friendships, family. No matter where we put that, that's where that happens at. We rarely get perfect certainty before we act. It's not going to happen. So the goal isn't eliminating the risk. The goal is moving thoughtfully into the presence of the risk and overcoming it with a plan.
I love that. Okay. Well, then I know where I'm going to take it from here. I think, and I thank you, Michael, for all of that. I think what I've heard, and it's a little different than what I think I was originally going to say, but this is often happens, is you spark thoughts, right? And that's what I love about our conversations. But I really want to challenge the community and anyone listening, and really push them here, because I think we maybe we haven't taken enough of a leap into this uncomfortable space. And I like the idea of framing it in the idea that you have to have courageous action, and that means you have to have directive thought. And so I say, if you've been struggling with networking, then you're overthinking. My challenge is message two people, two of those hiring managers, two individuals. It doesn't matter where you're coming from, 2-2-2 rule, or if you don't know what that is, just pick out two people that you have been overthinking about those messages and reach out to them. I think another big one that I would love to see is if you are feeling stagnant in the way that you're moving through your application process and you haven't sat down and just started to apply to jobs that excite you. Just apply to 5 jobs that excite you. It doesn't matter. Don't tweak the resume. Don't overthink it. Just apply to 5 different roles. You'll be amazed at what conversations could potentially happen. Worst case scenario, you hear nothing back, and that's no different than if you didn't apply at all. And so if you're stuck and you're not taking action on a Monday, do it, right? Because the truth of the matter is, there is no such thing as perfect action. But there is really, truly a concept here of where if you take no action, then you can never be courageous. And so the challenge is to be courageous and to take movement. And remember, you're not stuck. You're not stuck. None of us are stuck. We all have the opportunity to look at the choices in front of us and give ourselves a chance for change. And that discomfort that you feel in making that choice is the unlock that gives you a chance to have growth. So what I really challenge everyone here is lean into that uncomfortable action that you're running away from and just move into that discomfort and understand it's not the enemy, just like an ATS system is not your enemy. Just move forward and realize that every time you feel uncomfortable, that is an opportunity, that is a doorway that you have to choose to walk through so that you can have a chance to have the change needed for you to get out of this uncomfortable space in your life right now. That's the opportunity that we all have. And Michael, I think you said that so well on here, and I really appreciate you so much for coming and joining us and sharing that.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll open it up for everybody real quick. Actually, I know, Brittany, I think we were supposed to meet, so we're running late on that. But I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody listening. But I'll go to our question section for everybody that joined the call if anyone wants to chat or say anything on the side. So appreciate everybody. Thanks.